In the US today, there's a job post for about 120,000 DevOps or SRE engineers. But what's even crazier is that there's only 11,000 people actively working with this. Companies who develop software tell their regular developers to deal with infrastructure. And that's a little bit akin to telling your plumber to do work on your car. I quit Google almost 3 years ago to come onto this project. And this project for me was a way to learn how to code. A friend of mine had this idea that he wanted to build this platform, and we started coding on it. For me, it was just a way to start tinkering. I wanted to become a programmer, and then eventually we realized that we could actually commercialize this and make it into a business. It's crazy to know that we spoke with 75 partners. I don't think we did any cold outreach at all. A huge part of that is Techstars.
Hello, I'm Andrea Paulton. Welcome to another interview in our Techstars Founder Series, where we talk to amazing founders that have gone through one of our accelerator programs. And today we're speaking with the COO and co-founder of Ankra. His name is Ben, and Ben is going to tell us a little bit more about the company, but just in a short snippet, so you know what we're doing today, is we're talking about Ankra, which is a platform that provides developers a one-stop shop for their cloud infrastructure needs. So it saves time, it saves money, and it's a developer platform, which I am not an engineer nor a developer, so we're going to have to learn more about what the platform actually does. So hi, Benjamin. How's it going?
Hi, Andrea. It's going great. Thanks for having me on the show.
We talked a little bit before we started hitting record about Ankra, and for the people that don't know anything about development, can you please tell us what exactly Ankra does and how it helps developers speed up their processes and reduce cost and all that good stuff?
Yeah, for sure. So I think when we talk about things that are usually developer-centric, a really good way to phrase what we do is to start with a problem. And in the US today, there's a job post for about 120,000 DevOps or SRE engineers. That's a pretty staggering number, but what's even crazier is that there's only 11,000 people actively working with this. So what happens is that companies who develop software tell their quote-unquote regular developers to deal with infrastructure. And that's a little bit akin to telling your plumber to do work on your car. It doesn't usually work, it breaks frequently, and it's not very efficient, yet that's what the market does. And that's what we're here to solve. So we've built a platform to actually allow developers to gain the skill sets of senior DevOps engineers without actually knowing to understand what is underneath the hood.
Love it. And how long have you been working on it?
So I've been working on this project for quite some time. I quit Google almost 3 years ago to come onto this project. And this project for me was a way to learn how to code. It wasn't actually initially going to be a company. A friend of mine had this idea that he wanted to build this platform, and we started coding on it. For me, it was just a way to start tinkering. I wanted to become a programmer, and then eventually we realized that we could actually commercialize this and make it into a business.
Oh, that's so cool. And then what's the name? What does Ankra mean?
Yeah, so Ankra is the Swedish verb for to anchor. And the whole idea here is that you anchor your application with us, and it's steady. You don't have to worry about it.
Okay. And then you were together with some friends. So how many people are founders of Ankra?
So there's 2 more founders apart from me. And I'd be happy to tell the background story about how we met. People tend to appreciate that. It's myself, my friend Matthias, and my friend Mark. And Matthias and I went to middle school together, and Mark is a guy we met online playing video games. And we ran a business together when we were 15, 16 online, selling something called VPSs, which is virtual private servers. Kind of cloud before cloud was around. And we did that. We had absolutely no idea what we were doing at the time, but it worked. And I really wish we had Techstars, so that there was Techstars for teenagers at the time, because we would have been a whole lot more successful. But we did that for about a year. And then I went off to university. Matt started working. Mark went off to university. We exited the business for a nominal amount of money, but it was fun. And I think from that point, we realized that, okay, one day we're going to do this again and we're going to do it properly. And almost 15 years went by until we actually made something happen.
That's amazing. First of all, Techstars for teenagers. I'm going to have to write that down. That might be a really good thing. I love that.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to me that as a 15-year-old that you were already thinking about starting a business. So were you kind of like just born like that? You were always entrepreneurial, or how did that come about that you were so young and already thinking about that?
Yeah, we were all entrepreneurial, but what happened was that we were playing video games together, and we saw that a lot of people were asking for game servers in the chats. And we realized that, oh, we actually know how to set this up, and people seem to be paying decent amount of money for it. And so we started setting that up, but we realized also that people don't really trust teenagers, and we had to kind of hide our faces from it. And it's vastly different today. I think if you set up a business today as a teenager, you tend to be positioned as like, oh, this is really cool and this is great. But at the time, internet was new, like making transactions online could seem sketchy. Like the ecosystem has evolved so much since then. But to bring it back, we realized that, oh my God, we spent so much time playing video games. What if we, instead of trying to gain video game points, actually try to make money? And it kind of worked.
That's a really neat story. I love that. So you now have Ankra. You've been working on it for 3 years. What made you decide to join Techstars?
Techstars for us was a way to help us fundraise. Our business is relatively capital intense. What I mean by that is we're not deep tech in the sense that we don't need to have large manufacturing plants. We don't need to build very sophisticated hardware, but what we do need is we need a lot of developers. And to do that is very difficult if you don't have venture capital backing. And Techstars was our way to do that because we had no connections, we had no understanding of how venture capital was working, and Techstars came around and we saw that as a great opportunity.
That's good. Yeah, it's so hard when you're starting out and you don't have those connections. You're not in the venture capitalist room or network to actually even know where to get started. So that's a good reason to get started. I want to talk about capital a little bit later. First, I want to talk about maybe step by step. So now you got started, you started your accelerator. What is one big nugget of learning that you remember that you can take away from it that you were like, okay, that was awesome that I learned that at Techstars?
The way to go about fundraising, I think, is vastly different from my own understanding. I mean, I have a sales background, and it's very different when it comes to closing investors versus closing traditional deals. And I think what that means is that there's so much more nurturing involved when it comes to personal relationships and actually developing the personal relationships prior to asking for commitments and how important that is, but also managing to balance that without to not waste your time in building those personal relationships only then to realize that there's no viable business opportunity for you to work together. And so to find that balance was really key. And I think for us, what happened was that we always did a few minutes just understanding, first of all, is this in the long run ever going to work? And then we spent a lot of time getting to know the people. Is this someone I'm going to want to work with in the future? And only wanting to work with people who want to work with you, I think, was a huge learning for me, regardless of what they might be able to offer you, because if it's not fun, it's not going to be worth your...
Yeah, there's a huge, mental health component. This is your baby. This is your life for however many years you're part of it. That makes sense. And so when did you graduate from our accelerator?
So we had demo day on December 8th.
December 8th. Okay, so now we're in April. What has happened in the last 4 months with your company? What are you working on currently? What maybe changed that you're working on because you went through the accelerator?
Something really huge changed for us during the accelerator program, and I think towards the end of it as well, and that was our ICP. And the network that we built through Techstars really helped us navigate the market that we were going to approach. We had this initial idea that we were going to approach startups and scale-ups. And as we were going through Techstars and we started running customer interviews and doing more and more market research, we realized that many people who start companies have never actually scaled a software business before. So they don't understand the problems that they're going to run into. We realized that only about 10% of these companies know that they're going to have this issue. And all of a sudden we're there trying to convince them that this is an issue that they're going to have in the future, as opposed to actually speaking with the people that are having this problem. And so we ended up changing our ICP more to enterprise style clients. And we were a little bit scared of that coming into Techstars because we saw, okay, enterprise deals, long sales cycles, really complex stakeholder management. But we realized that, well, at least these people, they know, they have the pain that we can actually solve for. And we realized that it's much quicker to get to a decision maker with them than it is to try to convince, say, 10 startups for the same amount of deal value. And so, okay, so what has changed in the past 4 months? Well, first of all, we're closing a round now. So that's huge. We started hiring people, which is incredibly exciting to see what kind of power comes behind when you start hiring people who are better at doing things than you are. And every week they deliver results that you would have never been able to do yourself. I mean, especially when it comes to programming, those things are really salient. That's really gratifying to like see people believe in the project that you're working on and them delivering 150% towards that and doing it with a smile on their face. I love that.
Wow, that's awesome. Tell me a little bit more about the first funding that you got. Like, how did you find them? How many other people did you ask for money and they said no? Tell me about your experience there.
So I led the fundraising efforts for us, and I think I've spoken with almost 75 different parties before we came to a term sheet. It's difficult, especially these days, and especially when it comes to a product that is relatively hard to understand and to conceptualize for individuals who are necessarily not that tech savvy. And so for us, what happened relatively frequently was that they liked the idea from a business perspective, but they were unable to wrap their heads around what is the tech behind it. And they had to rely on third parties to validate it, which would take either too long time or it would take too much time and effort on our side to convince them. Eventually, we started finding the right people. And I think eventually the right people started finding us as well. So I think something that happens while you're on a fundraise is that the more people you talk to, the more people they talk to, because VCs share deal flow. And the more deal flow that they share, the more people who are relevant are going to come to you. And for us, as soon as we put Techstars on our LinkedIn profile, a lot of VCs started reaching out to us. And we took all the calls. And we were actually advised against doing that during program. But the reason we took the calls was we want to get the word out, who we are. Not that we're fundraising right now. So what we'd say is that we'd come on the call and say, hey, love that you're interested in what we're doing. I'm only interested in building a relationship right now, but I would love for you to follow our journey during Techstars so that you can see the progress that we're going to make over the coming 3 months. And then let's have a conversation around capital. And that helped us massively in terms of that. And it's crazy to know that we spoke with 75 partners. I don't think we did any cold outreach at all. A huge part of that is Techstars.
That's really cool. That's crazy. And then out of those 75, so it sounded like some of them were just kind of like intros. Hey, here's what we do. When you started asking for cash, when you started asking for investments and you got your first no's, how did you mentally handle that emotionally?
I've done like sales development and business development previously. So I was aware that this was going to be a roller coaster, but I saw a lot of other people in the program struggle with that and even starting to lose faith in their own products because all of a sudden they thought, oh, why aren't VCs believing in this? I worked so hard on this and I believe in this. And I think the key here is just like take it and move on. The worst thing that can come from a no, I think, is a no without feedback. If it's a no with feedback that doesn't make sense to you, then okay, you either have to understand where that comes from. It potentially that's worth a lot. What's even better if it's a no with good feedback. I mean, those things you learn a lot from. I mean, the amount of times I rephrase things, I rephrase the pitch during those 75 meetings. I mean, not 75 meetings, but during the fundraising process was immense. So I think in terms of the no, just enjoy the ride. There's going to be a lot of no's, but it's going to make the yeses so much sweeter once they start coming.
Yeah. And sometimes you only need one yes for every, 20 or 74 no's.
Yeah, there's that. And there's the classic of every no is one step closer to a yes as well.
Yeah, and I like that what you said, that you reiterated and you learned from the no's and you learned from those conversations, because that's the most important thing. Because if they're all saying the same thing or they're asking the same question, well, you need to have a better answer for that one question or the way that you word things, especially in what you're doing. It's complicated for people like me that are laymen that don't live in that world, So I'm glad that you got where you're at. Okay, so now you're here 4 months later after graduating. You have your first fundraise round done. What is next? What are you guys working on?
So we're scaling the team. We're actively going to market this quarter. We're doing some POCs with customers. I think the biggest challenge for us is scaling internal teams. And regardless of, I mean, there's mass layoffs from larger tech companies right now, and a lot of recruiters are saying that, okay, it's a good market for startups. But you'd be surprised how many developers are actually not interested in working for early stage startups. I think what a lot of people who say that they're interested in working in startups are actually interested in is working for scale-ups, where the funding is secured, where you might have closed a huge A round or an even larger B round. That to a lot of people is startup world. But that to me is like, oh, that's so far ahead, when if we were to be there, I'd feel much more on solid ground than what it is that we're doing right now. So hiring is a huge challenge, but it's also a lot of fun. And I can't remember if this is something that came through Techstars. I think it came from one of the mentors, and he said, look, if you're going to succeed, you need three things, and it's the three P's. You need people, product, and profit, in that order. If you do it the other way around and start focusing on profit, first of all, no one's going to stay, your product's going to suffer, and your business is going to fail. So get those three right.
Oh, I love that. That's really cool. That is definitely going to be like our number one advice to founders from this video. I love that. That's really good. Let's say everything goes your way. You're hiring the right people. Everything is rolling out. You're starting to sell to people. What is the main, or maybe not the end goal, but what is your big goal for Ankra in the next 5 years?
So within the next 5 years, we'd really like to make the development lifecycle a lot smoother. Today, unfortunately, the way it works for software developers is that you need to spend a lot of time doing research and testing tools and learning how different tools work. For example, to be cloud native today, you need to glue together approximately 15 different categories of services only to get the infrastructure running for your application. To find the right tools for those 15 different services, you need to dig through a sea of thousands and thousands of tools. And once you've found those tools that are going to work for you, you have to learn how they're going to be configured and how you're going to maintain them. And that is exactly what the bottleneck that we are working on removing. So for us, it's really ridiculous that software developers, they have to go out into the internet and they have to do this for yourself. But for consumers, if you need a solution today, you go to the App Store and you're like, okay, I want a note-keeping app. You go there and you download it. But for a developer, they don't have an App Store. They have to go find out which solutions are out there, and then they have to figure out, how do I configure that? Imagine if it was like that for consumers when they wanted to download an app from the App Store. It's like, nah, before you can start using this, you have to actually configure it yourself. You have to set all the terms, the sizes of it, and whatnot. So I think it's really exciting what's happening with AI, and we want to be part of that journey in terms of how do we make software development even more efficient. And I think within 5 years, that gap I was talking about earlier in terms of how many people work with DevOps versus how many people are needed, the amount of people that are needed should be 1/10 of the amount that's needed today.
For sure. So if somebody wants to get a hold of you and wants to learn more about your company, where do they go?
They can go to LinkedIn. They can find me there. They can go to ankra.io. We currently don't accept new users or new companies, so we're at capacity, but you can join the wait list, and we still have conversations with everyone who signs up to understand what is it that they need. Yeah, so I think LinkedIn is the best way to find us.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I want to interview you again in like 5 years, or maybe earlier than that, and see how you guys are doing, especially as you're rolling out in EMEA, and maybe eventually you'll come over to our side of the pond.
Yeah, perhaps. We'll see.
All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
All right. Thanks, Andrea.
Thanks everyone for tuning in today. If you enjoyed this episode and want to hear more stories from the Techstars Network, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out our other social media. If you're a founder looking to 10x your startup, do not hesitate to visit our website to apply to a program today. And most importantly, always remember, give first.